In this episode of the Project Management Podcast, we will set up a PMO in 100 days.
Hello and welcome to the Project Management Podcast at pm-podcast.com. This is episode 419 and I'm Cornelius Fichtner. Thank you for joining us. Is your company thinking about setting up a PMO and nobody, not even you, has the experience to do it? That's not a problem. Our guest today is Hussein Bandukwala. He is the organizer of the PMO Virtual Summit and PMOs are his passion. He writes and speaks about them. And in one of his articles he says that even if you've never done it before, you can still set up a PMO in 100 days. We discuss how realistic this is, what skills a PMO leader needs, the mindset needed to do this in 100 days, and then we'll take you phase by phase through the process of setting up your very own PMO in 100 days. Hello, Hussein, and welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much, Cornelius. It's great to be here.
In your bio on LinkedIn, you write the following. I help aspiring and first-time project management office leaders succeed. What is it that you personally like about PMOs?
PMOs come in different shapes, sizes, and personalities. There is no one size fits all. And every time you go about setting up a PMO, or rather every time you should go about setting up a PMO, you should literally start from scratch. Try to really understand why the PMO is needed and then take it from there. Don't try to set up a PMO that you may have seen someone set up somewhere else or done it yourself. Don't try to plug and play into the new organization because there are very good chances it's not going to work. So, having a lot of consulting background where, doing this cycle was was sort of second nature for me. And every time I went to a new client, there was a fresh beginning, getting to learn new people, getting to understand what the current pain points were. I can PMOs to just like that. So, just that in itself is so fantastic. And then I think the way PMOs can have an impact on an organization, I think that's just wonderful because if PMOs are done right, their goal, much like other departments in an organization, is to make sure that organization benefits its strategies successfully, and using project management as a tool for it to get there. So once all of those things get into action and just seeing the beauty about how PMOs and PMO leaders have that vantage point to see and touch everything within the organization and be able to successfully move the needle for it, I think it can be a very, very powerful asset to any organization. And that's something that really draws me to it.
And what is the definition of a PMO in your own words?
So, simplistically, Cornelius, I do believe that PMO is just like an IT department, just like a finance department, is nothing more than just a department for a company. And a lot of people think that, oh my God, PMOs need to make sure that project management is the key, that, the projects need to get done on time, on budget, on schedule. Yes, that's absolutely true, but that's just a means to an end. The end goal for PMOs is to make sure that whatever the needs for the organization for it are, whether it is, being an administrative body where, just some standards and governance needs to be in place, that needs to happen, or whether it needs to also be an executing body where it needs to also make sure that those standards and governance that you're putting into place for project management are also getting executed the way you had requested or required them to be. Or it could be a strategy body as well, making sure that the right projects are happening at the right time and done by the right people in the right way. And it really could be of any function, but the beauty is that you need to determine where the organization wants you to be, and over time that can change, for the organization, and it can change from its functionality, but then it can also change in terms of its scope. So for instance, a project management office could be for a program, or it could be for a certain department, or it could be for a certain region. And then once it finds some success in its original scope, that could change. It could go to multiple departments, it could go to multiple regions, and eventually it could, permeate throughout the entire organization. So in a nutshell, it's just a department set to make sure that organizations' business goals are met, and it's done through the effective execution of project management.
Our discussion today is based on an article that you wrote. It is titled Setting Up a PMO for the First Time. No PM experience? Wow them in 100 days. So you're suggesting that somebody without PM experience can set up a PMO in 100 days. Is that even possible?
Yes, it is possible. The chances are slim, but it's possible. I've seen that happen personally, where one of the clients that I worked with was a business analyst, and he was completely fed up by the way projects were being run within the organization. There was no consistency, no predictability, and he decided to go about taking up how to set up a PMO on his own. He connected with me. He came up with a pitch to the leadership. He decided to do this on his own as a side project. Again, this was a small company, not a large or mid-sized organization, a small company where it was needed. And slowly and surely, he was able to go ahead and set up a PMO, and that reaped some positive benefits and dividends for him. So kudos to him for that. Is that even possible? Yes, it is possible. But is it always possible? No, absolutely not. In larger organizations, the scope of PMOs is usually much greater. The need of the hour in terms of the maturity that the PMO needs to get to very quickly, that's different. And so you need to have someone experienced over there. And then I think we'll talk a bit about that as we get down into it as well. But then there's a lot of questioning around, is project management even a skill that you need as a PMO leader? The answer is yes, but you don't have to be an absolute guru or an ace to do it. Having some knowledge and experience is good enough, because ultimately you are not a project manager. You are going to be a PMO leader, and that's what you need to make sure you're focusing on.
So let's jump right into this. What are the main differences between a project manager and a PMO leader?
That's a great question, Cornelius. So firstly, there are a couple of differences. Actually, there are lots of differences between just a leader and a manager, right? A leader focuses on doing the right things. A manager works on doing things right. A leader eyes the horizon. A manager focuses on the bottom line. But these are differentiations between a leader versus a manager, right? So we can talk all day about that. So let's maybe just stop there about those differentiation and just talk about the functionalities and responsibilities and accountabilities of a PMO leader versus a project manager, right? So a PMO leader, in a nutshell, is someone who is responsible for the setup, evolution, and operation of an entire department, which is the PMO. And that includes, making sure that its culture, its working style, all of that is within the periphery of a PMO leader. A project manager, on the other hand, is a member or an associate of the PMO. The reason why I say a member or an associate is because a member is someone who is directly reporting into a PMO, but in certain organizations, project managers are indirectly reporting to the PMO, in which case they're an associate of the PMO. PMO leader is ultimately responsible for the success of the entire portfolio of projects that is within its periphery. Project manager is only responsible for the success of his or her projects that he is doing. A project management office leader is, really is driving the forefront of setting the standards, methodologies, tools, templates, processes, etc. for the organization, understanding what the benefits for the entire portfolio are, prioritizing all of those things. The project manager usually takes all of these and runs with them, right? So essentially, if you take a direct comparison of the two, really, project manager's success is a PMO success, and a PMO success is the organization's success. So really, while the the project manager is shooting for the performance of his or her team, which obviously indirectly impacts the PMO, which obviously indirectly impacts the organization. The project management office leader's accountability is for the performance of the entire project portfolios team, as well as all the stakeholders, etc., that come in working and in contact with it.
That is a great way of putting it. I've never heard it put that way. Project manager's success is a PMO success because the project was completed successfully, and a PMO success is a company success. I like that. That's new. I have never heard that before.
Thank you, Cornelius. And I know, Cornelius, that there are probably a lot of project managers listening to this right now, and I just want to make sure that this is not to lessen the role of a project manager. It is just to call out the differentiation between these two roles, because there might be a fallacy that I'm an expert project manager, so I can automatically become a project management office leader. I think that's a myth. Similarly, you can get 15, 20, 30 years of project management experience, yet you may never get a PMO leadership role. That may be by choice or because, there are other skills that come with the territory of being a project management office leader that you need to work upon as well to ultimately get that role.
Well, let's go right there then. Skills. What are the skills that I will need to set up a PMO? And remember, we were talking about your article, setting up a PMO in 100 days. So
yes.
What are the skills I need to set up a PMO in 100 days?
Sure. As a PMO leader, I do categorize skills into 4 main categories. The first bucket is obviously project management, right? I don't want to discount the fact that project management is not a required skill. It is a required skill, but not to the point that you absolutely have to be in complete ace. If you've done it a bit, that's totally fine. You know the tricks and trades. You know a bit of how to ride the ropes. That's totally fine. The second element is the organizational skills. So anything around cost center accounting, what are the HR policies, how can you instill some culture within your PMO department, how to go ahead and work towards understanding the right strategy, deploying the right strategy, connecting strategies to tactics. Those are all the organizational skills that are important and necessary for a PMO leader to have. The third type of skill is a functional skill. So, these skills are very departmental specific. So let's say, if you're running a procurement, if you're a PMO specifically for the procurement department, it's great for you to have that knowledge of how procurement actually works, how does supply chain work, so that once you can really you can roll up your sleeves and dive into how you can help that department really become efficient at what it does, and not just making sure that the projects are getting done and the projects are adding value, but doing more to making sure that the department is doing better as a whole and really being a peer to that departmental head. Similarly, if it's a marketing department, if it's an IT department, if you're a PMO for a specific function or department within an organization, just having very intimate knowledge and skills or background in that specific function can be extremely useful. And finally, and to me, the most important skills are the people skills. So this can be, negotiation skills, communication skills, facilitation skills, presentation skills, all those skills rolled up into one. How do you deal with people? How do you communicate with them? How do you deal with politics? Those are all important skills that I believe that you need to have when you become a PMO leader.
Okay, so we have project management skills, organizational skills, functional skills, and people skills. I'd like to go a little bit deeper here because setting up a PMO in 100 days is not an easy undertaking. You have to have the right mindset to do this. Even if you have these 4 skills, you gotta have the right mindset. What kind of a mindset do I need to pull this off in 100 days?
So that's a great question once again, because mindset and skill sets go hand in hand, right? Before I answer that question, though, Cornelius, I do want to mention that while I do believe that PMOs can be set up in 100 days, I also do believe that not all PMOs can be set up in 100 days. And I think that having a 100-day mindset, though, is super important because, you know, the first 100 days, I do believe, is applicable to any leader, not just to the President of the United States, not just to any head of state or government, but to any leader. And for PMO leaders, that's usually not an expectation. So if you do have that mindset and are proactive about it, you've already put a fantastic foot forward to your organization, to the leadership of your organization, that you're in there to mean business, right? So just within yourself, okay, if the scope within your findings, if you do determine that you can set up the PMO in 100 days, totally fine. But if you can't, you must still lay down the roadmap for your leadership, what you can achieve within those 100 days, and then constantly go ahead and communicate your progress on that roadmap to your leadership, to your stakeholders, as well as your team. So, the first and foremost is having that 100-day mindset. That is key, right? And there are a couple of other layers that I'd like to talk about that are associated with that. So firstly, how do you come up with that? You need to have the right awareness when you came into the organization. So let's say, for instance, you were a new person in that organization and you're setting up a PMO. You need to make sure that you understand who are the key players, why is the PMO really needed, who is asking you to do that, and why are they asking you to set up a PMO. But then you need to go about connecting with other people and stakeholders within the organization. So having that broad awareness is key. Also, what are the skill sets that you're bringing in, and what are your strengths, but what are your weaknesses? So which people should you be looking at in terms of who can complement you and the skills that you have? Having that awareness, working with the right people, that's key. Number two is looking at, the right attitude. Always have a can-do attitude, right? If it's not no, it's not now, but at this time, right? So making sure that you have that can-do attitude. If one of the things that PMO is really notorious about, Cornelius, is the fact that they are gatekeepers. They slow things down. That's the perception that PMOs have. So if you already are right at the start, go and say, you know what, yeah, sorry, I can't do this. That's not going to help. Be welcoming, have an open mind, have that can-do attitude, and that will help you just build those relationships that you need to succeed in your PMO setup. And then finally, urgency, right? So we talked about that 100-day mindset. Let's have a bit of urgency as well, because some of these things can take time in terms of the planning, in terms of understanding why you need the PMO to happen. As you're understanding what needs to happen, why it needs to happen, you might really identify a few things that you might be able to implement immediately, which I like to call quick wins, right? So if you're able to identify some of these quick wins and can deliver on those while you're doing some of the planning and while you're creating your roadmap, etc., people will perceive you to be someone who not just talks and plans, but is also taking action, and taking action effectively, in the sense that when you are rolling out those things, they're actually making a difference to the organization. And having these mindsets together, that is the 100-day mindset, having the right awareness, the attitude, and showing urgency, I think with that, you're good to go about setting up your PMO.
In your article, you outlined a 4-phase approach in setting up a PMO in 100 days. When I asked you about the skills, there were 4 skills as well. You gave us a great, quick overview over these 4 skills. So we want to jump into each of these 4 phases in more detail, but can you maybe give us sort of a high level 10,000 foot view briefly, so, a minute or so of these 4 phases, a quick summary to get us started?
Absolutely, Cornelius. So the 4 phases are assessing the maturity, understanding what the target state is, and creating the roadmap, prioritizing and implementing, and the final phase is optimizing. So the first phase, assessing the maturity, is really determining why the PMO is really needed. If there is a PMO that already exists, what is it all about? If you don't have a PMO in your organization, then be it. Number 2, phase 2 is, target state and roadmap. So what is the ultimate goal for the PMO? Where it should be? How are all the whys getting addressed? And the roadmap or the plan to get you there. Phase 3 is once you have the roadmap, how are you going to prioritize it? Is it something that you can just all implement all at once? Does it need to be phased, etc.? And then finally, and then also implementing your plan. So putting your plan, executing your plan, and putting it into action. And then finally, optimizing, or what I also like to call continuous improvement, is once you've achieved your roadmap, you always need to continuously look at what more, what else, what different can your PMO do. So just to again recap, Cornelius, phase 1 is assessing maturity. Phase 2 is target state and roadmap. Phase 3 is prioritizing and implementing. And phase 4 is optimizing or continuous improvement.
Excellent. And now let's jump into each of these four in a little bit more detail. What you have also done is you have assigned sort of a duration to each of these phases. And, I'll bring those four up and then hand it over to you so you can give us all the details about this. So phase 1 begins on day 0 and lasts until about day 28. That is assess maturity. What do we do here?
So these days, again, Cornelius, these are guides. These are something, if it's something that, once you get into the organization, when you're setting up a PMO, you can get a very good sense right at the offset whether these guides are some reasonable for you or not. And then, there's obviously some latitude towards moving things around. But, I do believe that the key steps in assessing the maturity is, again, all about determining what the current state of the PMO is. Like I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a PMO here, that's totally fine. But what you really need to do, even if you don't have a PMO, you don't have to understand the current state of the PMO, but you still need to put the organization under the lens of curiosity, right? So how are the different processes working within the organization? Is there any synergy between them? What are the tools and techniques that are being used? Are they outdated? Things are not working. Essentially, most of the reason why you're there is that something is not working. Some of the common reasons why I've heard PMOs being created are that, saying I have like 50 strategic projects that are going on, but none of them are finishing on time, or my organization is really increasing and I have no visibility into who's doing what, or, everybody's doing their own thing. So it's like more of a wild, wild west situation out here, right? So I'm making, even if there's no PMO, just having these conversations can really give you a good idea of, okay, what are some of the things that really need to come into play here? So that way you can understand what the strengths of the organization are, what the weaknesses are, and what you can do by bringing in a PMO to help bridge that gap, right? So that is really the first phase, if you will, Cornelius, of the PMO. And, one of the things that I like to really talk about is, what are some of the checklist items that you should really do as part of each of these phases? And for the phase 1, it's really about identifying your key stakeholders. You got to do that and interview them. Don't just stop at the executive leadership, but also talk to other stakeholders, your other departments that your PMO is expected to work with. And don't forget the project managers. I've seen PMO leaders, talk to everyone except their own team. Well, no matter how big your vision is, it's your project management team that will help realize it. If you don't have their back, if you don't address their concerns, you can create a beautiful roadmap. It's all going to fall flat. So identifying your key stakeholders and interviewing them, that is absolutely important. Can you be a one-man army? Is that the scope small enough, or the need for it is small enough right now? Or do you need to assemble a staff? What are your hiring needs for the PMO? That's the second checklist item for this phase. And the third item, something that I alluded to earlier as well, quick wins. What are some of the quick wins you can do in your first 100 days? Is it maybe creating a one document which identifies all the projects with the right priorities? Is it producing a bunch of templates in non-project management speak so other people can understand them when filling them out? Depending on what the pain points you've heard, you can build your quick wins list accordingly.
Okay, that was phase 1, assess maturity, which goes from day 0 to day 28, roughly. And then already on day 21, overlapping phase 1, so from day 21 to 49, we have phase 2, which is establish target state and define the roadmap. So what do we do here, Hussein?
So Cornelius, here, once you have determined why the PMO needs to be created, you need to then understand and articulate and determine what are some of the things that the PMO can do to to address those pain points. So for instance, if there are 50 projects going on at the same time and none of them are getting done on time, why is that? Let's take another look at it. Is it because once a new project comes up, the old project is abandoned? Is it because people are spread too thin? Is it because nobody is putting any pressure to get all of them done? What are some of those reasons? And then what can the PMO do to address that? As you go about identifying the answers for each and every one of those reasons, each and every one of those whys, you'll literally come up with the list of roles and responsibilities of your PMO, which essentially becomes the target state of your PMO, of where your PMO should be. And if you don't have a PMO, then what your new PMO should do, right? And then at the same time, it also gives you a good reference point of the scope of the PMO. Is it for a specific department? Is it for the entire company? Is it for a certain geographic region? What is it? That is something that will become very clear in phase 2 as well. And then how would you measure that? So you've understood why, you've understood what. Now, how do you measure the what? Because that is so important. How will you be able to articulate your progress? And once you finish, what does success look like? So you do need to understand qualitatively and quantitatively, aka metrics, what the performance of your PMO is going to be looking like as well. So that is key within this specific phase, Cornelius. And I would say the 3 checklist items here really are is, review and finalize the PMO's business case. So once you've determined what the PMO needs to do, who is it doing it for, what are the key metrics that are involved, who are the sponsors associated with it, package that all together into a business case, not only to get a formal go ahead, but also to formally communicate with the rest of the organization the intent, the value, and the goal of the PMO. So that's number 1. Checklist number 1, review and finalize PMO business case. The checklist item number 2 for this phase is start hiring. So you talked about who you need to hire for in phase 1. And if you don't need to hire for anyone, that's fine. Don't worry about it. But if you do, now is the time. And then step 3 is really within your first 100 days, what are the couple of milestones that you want to achieve? In phase 1, we talked about what are some of the quick wins we want to achieve. Quick wins aren't milestones. Quick wins are great plugs that you want to go ahead and make sure that you are showing action that is producing immediate value to the organization. Milestones are for the roadmap that you're delivering. What are some of the key pieces within the setup of your PMO? So for instance, if it's making the first 5 hires, for instance, that could be a milestone. Or if you have a multiple phases of a PMO rollout, then maybe each phases could be different milestones. So just need to make sure that gets flushed out more so within phase 2. So those would be the 3 checklist items for phase 2, Cornelius.
All right, that means we're moving over to phase 3, which is prioritize and implement. Phase 3 starts on day 35, more or less, and lasts until day 84. So, purely from a visual perspective, phase 3 starts at about the middle of phase 2, if I see that right, sort of visually in my head. What do we do in phase 3, Hussein?
Yes, I'm so glad you pointed that out, Cornelius, because there is a bit of an overlap there. Because once you understand what the PMO needs to do, you can start testing it through creating a pilot, right? And the pilot is so important because you can plan all you want. There's every time you come up with a plan, something or the other will go wrong. I mean, that's always a reality of project management. And, like, as I'm sure listeners can imagine, the whole exercise that we're doing right now of laying all of this out is literally drawing up a high level project plan for how to create and set up a PMO. And so this really, you would say, from a project management perspective, you're not doing a UAT, but initial testing of what a PMO can do. If you have a pilot, let's go ahead and determine a small scope of, and that scope could be maybe the entire functionality of a PMO could be released to a small number of stakeholders, or you could have a small number of stakeholders getting just a subset of the overall functionalities of a PMO. Whatever it is, that still needs to happen, because that's where rubber meets the road. And we need to understand whether, number one, what we had thought and what people said were their pain points, was that really the case? How we have delivered the solution, is that working it out or not? And how are we delivering that change? Because every time you're bringing in something new, you're introducing something new, and there's a change in there. So is that effective or not? Is that change management effective or not? Is that been communicated in a way that has been understood by people? Has that been communicated in a way where there is the pace is right, or whether people are just rushing through it? Was there a good transition element, such as knowledge materials and cheat sheets, etc.? That is important for a PMO pilot to flesh out. Now, once the pilot is done, you can take those learnings and build that into your overall rollout of all the phases, multiple phases of your PMO. And here it's literally just executing it. If you do need to go about going through different phases, maybe at this point you're still prioritizing which phases to go for. But if that has already been set in the target state, which is phase 2, then this is all about implementing, going full throttle ahead. So really that's what, as the name suggests, of this phase, it's all about prioritizing and implementing. I would say the 3 checklist items here, Cornelius, that would be helpful for PMO leaders to keep an eye out on are, number one, from that pilot, do a lessons learned and incorporate those lessons learned into the overall rollout of the PMO. Number 2, conduct roadshows across the organization. So if you are if you're a PMO for various different departments, if your projects that will be within your periphery are now touching different organizations, different departments within the organization, you need to meet with all of them. Tell them exactly what you're doing, what the PMO is, why it's there, and what it can do for them. What are the changes that it will bring for them, where you need their help and support, where you're going to be there to support them. That is so important, because if that doesn't happen, it's all a game of perception then. And you don't want to leave things to chance. You do want to make sure that you are doing everything you can to make sure that people are truly understanding why you're there and what difference you can make. Have these roadshows to make sure that they are extremely targeted towards those specific departments and stakeholders. Remember, in phase 1, you spoke with all of them, right? So you already understand what are the concerns they have brought towards you. So with your PMO that you're rolling out now, which of those issues, pain points have you addressed or are addressing? Specifically talk about those. And if there are any that you're not addressing, talk about those as well. Bring them up. Don't let them bring that up for you. You be proactive and bring that up, because there could be many reasons. There could be reasons about deprioritizing this to different phases, or there could be reasons because there are some other areas that the PMO is going to take care of that will indirectly take care of those concerns. So those are the things that you need to take care of for that. And then finally, achieving one major milestone. That would be the third major checklist item for a PMO leader for this phase. Rolling out a PMO in itself is a major milestone. So that this one really goes unsaid, but I just wanted to make sure that people understand that, because when you are identifying milestones in phase 2, you want to make sure that in phase 3, you're very cognizant about making sure that explicitly you're communicating the achievement of those milestones as well.
We are moving on to phase 4, which you titled Optimize. It starts on day 77 and goes all the way to day 100. What do we do here?
So this is all about making sure that the performance of your PMO is now at a point where you have promised it to be. Once the PMO is out, you need to start monitoring and measuring its performance based on qualitative and quantitative metrics, have a good understanding of what data you need to measure, what data you need to collect to deliver those specific metrics that you want to measure, and have a habit of always supporting the reasons of why the PMO is doing what it's doing or the way it's performing. So don't just spit out data, provide reasoning in English or any other language of your choice to make sure that you are communicating clearly of how the PMO is performing. And don't just, again, leave it out to chance where you're just sharing it with executive leadership, share it with other stakeholders as well. And again, like I mentioned to you, Cornelius, phase 1 was all about why the PMO needs to be set up. Over time, that will change. The organization's strategies will change. The organization's priorities will change. Internal and external circumstances will change, which will mean that the PMO will need to change itself to be able to be in an effective position to address those. And so every 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, the PMO needs to do the cycle again, is ask again, okay, what is it that the PMO is doing? Is it still applicable? Is it still valid? Is it still effective? If not, what are we doing to change that, right? So changing in its own functionality and addressing that is something need to happen within this phase. Number 2, in the scope. So for instance, if it was just applicable for one department, now does it need to work with other departments? Or if it was just specific within a certain geography, does it need to expand to other geographies as well? Those are things that the PMO leader needs to constantly keep an eye out on as well. At the same time, in terms of when it's optimizing itself, that means it needs to perform more or perform better, which means that it in itself is increasing its own maturity level, which means that the maturity level of the people within it, its own project managers, coordinators, analysts, whoever have you, that needs to change as well. So, making sure that making the right hires as well as focusing on the training and development of its own team is also center and paramount for this phase for PMO leader as well. Here, I would say the top 3 items really to talk about here are, making sure that there's a standard PMO progress metric dashboard that is placed, that the success is publicized early and often for the PMO. And then again, like I talked about, the maturity of the staff, create a roadmap to make sure that the people are well set on their own professional development.
Excellent. So we have the 4 phases of assess maturity. Is phase 1. Phase 2 is establish target state and define the roadmap. Phase 3 is prioritize and implement. And then phase 4 is optimize. Setting up a PMO in 100 days. Even if we follow your model, that is a challenge. How can we boost our chances for success here?
That's a great question. So, the first point that I would say is that you need to have the mindset that where you're not only serving the leadership, but you're also helping project managers as well. I think I mentioned this earlier in our conversation as well, is that having your project management team, having your team, whether it's coordinators, project managers, making sure that you're addressing their concerns, that's super important. So you have to be as transparent with them as possible where you can be. Also, I would say that working towards developing perhaps a community of practice for people within your team is key. Your PMO needs to be a safe haven for your team where people, aren't ostracized or continuously judged, but people can come in openly, share their concerns, frustrations even, and not only be a good sounding board, but be a forum for good strategy and tactics for the effective execution of projects. So that's the first thing. I also would say that for a PMO leader, learning on the job is also extremely important. So we talked about the development of the team. Let's talk about the development of the PMO leader as well, right? And there are lots of resources that are out there in terms of books, in terms of courses, in terms of blogs and podcasts. But I think that finding mentors and coaches are also extremely important. If let's say if you're a departmental PMO and you have other PMOs within your organization, talk to those PMO leaders and see how things are going, what is the direction that their PMO is going in, learn from them. Or if you feel that someone who is an expert in PMO setups and evolution, a coach, if you will, who can really be a sounding board and be an advisory position for you as a PMO leader, then I think that can be a very valuable asset as well. Just in sports where you see, coaches can accelerate the success and make sure that it's not only just accelerated, but also consistent, in the business world, specifically in the PMO world, that can be the case as well. And then finally, I would say is we talked a lot about team. I want to talk about it one more last time, is making sure that you have the right staff to help you deliver, right? So people within your organization, as you see what your needs are, what the skill set is required, what the mindset is required for your PMO, people need to make sure they need to buy into your vision and be champions for your PMO, right? And so to summarize that, you need folks who understand the company and its systems well, understand the metrics involved, and how that data can be translated into information, and can be very proactive about what else can be done in that situation. And then finally, people who trust your vision for the PMO and buy into it.
In closing, you've just given us great tips and advice on how we can boost our chances for success. But in closing, what are your tips for anyone who wants to get going with setting up their PMO in the next 100 days? Where do they start? What do they do?
I think the very first thing that they need to focus on, Cornelius, is the why of the PMO, and that will really set everything else up. That is the toughest stage, in my opinion, for anyone. But I think they should really enjoy that stage. They should really, put on their Sherlock Holmes cap, if you will, and be a detective about it. Understand who all the stakeholders are within your organization. Who should you be speaking with? What are all the layers of curiosity that you have that you want to answer before you go ahead and say, all right, you know what? This is the direction I want to head in. Remember, that direction is going to define what your PMO is going to be. You need to be convinced yourself, not that somebody else has told you, not that, if it's a higher leader or authority or just some hallway conversations that you've had. You need to be convinced that indeed is the right direction for your PMO to be the asset that your company can't live without. Once you're convinced, it'll become easier for you to convince others that indeed is the direction your PMO should be heading towards.
Hussein, thank you so much for stopping by and showing us that it is indeed possible for setting up a PMO in 100 days. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Cornelius. It's been a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
Hussein Bandukwala is a PMO coach. He helps aspiring and first-time PMO leaders succeed through coaching, webinars, workshops, and training. He is also a speaker, author, and LinkedIn learning instructor. Find more at parvazcc.com and pmovirtualsummit.com. And that's it. Thank you very much for listening. Please visit pm-podcast.com for show notes, links, transcripts, and PDU information. Our email address is info@pm-podcast.com. And finally, we have this quote from Roald Amundsen that every project manager should take to heart. Adventure is just bad planning. Until next time.